Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cortalinhas podcast. I'm your host, Zach Lowy. It's been a 2-month hiatus, but I'm proud to say that your favorite podcast on Portuguese football is back, and we've got a fantastic show for you today. Sam Fonseca joins us from London. Cristiano Oliveira joins us from New Jersey. 2 recurring guests. Great to have them both on. We've got Sam, a Sporting fan, and Cristiano, a Benfica fan, here to discuss the first Derby de Lisboa of 2023, the weekend's main event in Portuguese football. Really massive match. So, Sam, Cristiano, how are you guys doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sure we'll get into the game eventually, but it was definitely a fun watch, I would say. But yeah, I'm good. Thank you, man.
I'm doing well. Disappointed with the result. It felt like one of those, it was a draw that felt like a loss. So I'm pretty sure we'll talk about this in the next couple of minutes. But I'm excited to be back here on the Cortalinhas podcast. BTL representing, baby. So thanks, Zach, for the invite once again.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, Cristiano, because a draw that feels like a loss. I actually got that sensation from a lot of Sporting fans after this match. And so Benfica and Sporting taking on each other at the Estádio da Luz. Sporting opening the scoring after 27 minutes with an own goal from Alexander Ba. 10 minutes later, Benfica level proceedings via Goncalo Ramos. Pedro Gonçalves putting the visitors ahead once again from the penalty spot in the 53rd minute after Antonio Silva was judged to have brought Paulinho down to the floor. And then Goncalo Ramos once again scoring the equalizer to snatch a 2-2 draw for Benfica. I think that this is interesting because Sporting, they had a pretty competent performance. This has not been a great season for Sporting, let's face it. They've drawn twice. They've lost 5 times. They've conceded 18 goals and just scored 31 goals. That's less than Benfica, Braga, or Porto. They're currently 4th place in the league. We're halfway through the Primeira Liga season, and they are 12 points away from first place Benfica, 8 points away from Braga, and 7 points away from Porto. So I feel like this was a great, a great example, a great time for Sporting to get a win, close the distance between them and their massive rivals, because it does seem like top 3, and of course top 3 meaning Champions League football, is slowly slipping away from their grasps. I think that Sporting, they played a decent match. They'll be kicking themselves for not getting the win. But with that being said, you have to acknowledge the fact that Benfica have had a much better season than them. So it's interesting. Sam, talk to me a little bit about how you felt that your Lions did at the Estádio da Luz.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being completely honest, I thought we were going to get absolutely smashed before the game even started. If you offered me the draw, before the game, I would have said, yeah, 100% I'd take it. The first half, I thought we played really well. We kept possession of the ball quite well. We had really good attacks, just some sort of miscommunications. Like, for example, I can remember Trincao making a run and Edwards passing it just a little bit too far. But in terms of overall, I thought, I get what you say where Cristiano says that it's a draw that feels like a loss. But I agree that I think you can look at it from both teams, because I think Benfica absolutely dominated us in the second half. Goncalo Ramos was on fire. A great striker getting into those positions. It takes a really good clinical striker to get in the positions. You can argue if the finishes were easy or not, but Ramos has to do that. The only thing so I was proud of my team. I thought we played really well. Just a few defensive miscommunications which resulted in the goals. I will say I was heated at the time. I'm calmed down now. I did accuse Artur Soares-Dias of being a Benfica fan after that it was great defending on Ugarte, I must say. If that was a player, I would have said that was fantastic. But
when he set the pick,
say that again, sorry?
When he set the inadvertent pick,
he did the Draymond Green pick and roll. But but yeah, I was angry at the time, of course I was. But then looking back, Arturo Diaz should have given Ugarte a yellow card on the foul for Otamendi, which wasn't given. I will say that was a 100% yellow card. I think it's just the standard in referees in general is just a bit awful in the Portuguese league. And for a big game like this, there were a lot of calls that were missed. There was a lot of calls given that probably shouldn't have been. And just that goal, the first goal where he does set the pick on Ugarte, it did make me angry because I don't think a referee should be that close to play anyway. But yeah, I think I was really proud of what we did. I feel like we were unlucky, but also at the same time, it was our defensive miscommunications that ended up in the Benfica goals, as well as great play from Goncalo Ramos as well. So if we're looking at it from even stuff, I thought we dominated the first half, Benfica dominated the second. So overall, I think a draw is probably fair.
I think it's fair to say you dominated the first 20, 25 minutes. I don't know about the whole first half. You did the early, and I'm not trying to be a clown at all by any stretch of the imagination, but clearly Sporting was the better team in the early. If you want to even go as far as 30 minutes, fine. I'll grant you that. To my surprise, to be brutally honest with you, because I thought Benfica would try to assert themselves in the game a lot earlier than they did. Credit to Sporting, but at the end of the day, Sporting had all the pressure coming out and getting the 3 points because, as we all know, came into this game 12 points behind. Benfica, Zach just went over all these stats, and obviously fighting for that last Champions League spot, which is going to be absolutely key to you guys. But the one thing about these derbies, if you go back in years past, right? I remember Benfica Porto, and it just even Benfica Sporting and vice versa. A lot of the times, when you go into these games, you anticipate a result, right? You try to come out and, predict the result. And 9 out of 10 times, bro, it's the team that's in the worst form that comes away with the better result in that one match, which to me, I predicted 3-0 because I just wanted to be a clown. But I
predicted that as well for you. So don't worry, was it just you? I
figured it was going to be a little bit tighter, but I just, I was on a Benfica podcast and I wanted to try to stir things up a little bit. That being said, I thought Benfica, once they got a hold of the game, I thought Benfica was okay. Look, there's a lot of Benfica talking about Benfica was dominant. Benfica played well. I didn't see that Benfica that most of these people are talking about. I thought Benfica was okay. I thought Sporting had their moments, but really in the second half, from that 30-minute mark on, it was all Benfica. Not that, commanding as I stated, as most people are saying they did. I thought the difference in this game was Benfica's finishing, Benfica's ability to finish. I've complained about this on Benfica Podcast for God knows how long now. And you've seen Rafa with the one-on-one, I forget, I think it was Reis, whichever was center back of yours, got his hand on his shoulder. You kind of question that call, should have gone to VAR. Because my one thing, but before I get into the finishing, my one thing is about Artur Soares Diaz. My note on him was, in these games, you need to be consistent. If you're going to be consistently bad, if you're going to be bad for one team, be bad for the other team. I have no problem with.
You don't think he was consistent?
No, not at all. No, absolutely not.
I think he was consistently bad throughout.
Yes, but I'll just get to that. I just wanted to finish the point on Benfica's ability to finish. You had Rafa, you had João Mario. In the first half, Benfica could have at least, let's say you put one away, now it's a totally different game, but they did it. Credit to Sporting to do what they have to do. But going back to now Artur Soares Diaz, the one thing with Artur Soares Diaz is I thought it was a clear foul. That's fine. You want to give it a foul on the 5-minute mark when Otamendi slides in on Porto. You want to say that's a foul? That's fine. I mean, he grazes him. That's a foul. I didn't think, I'm not being a Benfiquista because anybody that knows me knows that I call a spade a spade. I didn't think he warranted a yellow. Okay, it's 5 minutes in. He grazed him. Like, had he come in and hit him hard? Okay, fine. But he grazed him, whatever. And then Ugarte gets foul after foul after foul, and just kept giving him a warning, let him get away with it. I thought there was no consistency there. I have no problem with the penalty for Sporting going to VAR and a whole nine. I'm okay. To me, it was clumsy on Antonio Silva's part. That's a penalty all day. But again, if you really want to nitpick and you start seeing different angles and different replays, how come the VAR didn't call? And I'm not saying that Benfica didn't get the win because of the penalties didn't go our ways. But if you're gonna nitpick, right? How come the VAR didn't call Artur Soares Diaz over to the sideline to go look at that play on Rafa?
The only reason I don't think they looked at it is because I don't think even Rafa appealed for a penalty or anything. No Benfica players did. I agree that it should have been looked at.
You as the VAR judge, you shouldn't be there with the player. You know what I mean? Your job is to do your job, regardless of who complains or not. So my thing is, I thought Artur Soares Diaz was not consistent at all. And I'm not saying that's the reason why Benfica didn't get the 3 points, but it definitely changes the game. Ugarte got his yellow card, in his 5th to 6th foul in the second half already. And again, and if you played football as I did, and I don't know if you guys have, but trust me, it changes the total outcome of a game, changes the way you approach a game. And so Ugarte's, aggressiveness maybe wouldn't have been there in the second half because obviously he's on a yellow card watch or second yellow card watch. So I just thought he was consistent. And I'm not saying he was the reason why Benfica didn't come over with 3 points, but I don't think he was good at all. So for Sportingistas to say that, to point the finger at Artur Soares Diaz, I think you're watching the game with green-colored glasses.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, just last point was just, I agree with what you're saying. Like, if they should have looked at the VAR for Rafa, I'm not going to disagree. There was some, like you said, consistency. When Paulinho went down, I still don't know if Otamendi's elbow hit him. I'm not saying Otamendi should have been sent off, given a yellow card or anything, but it was a head injury. You stop the game straight away for a head injury. That is the rule and has been for like the last 5-6 years.
Sam, he didn't hit him in the head.
Yeah, I know, but if you see someone go to the head, you have to stop it.
Yeah, but he didn't hit him in the head.
Yeah, I know. I'm not debating that.
Paulinho was making a meal out of it. Let's be honest.
Paulinho does that all the time. I agree.
When we sit here, I don't know how many Benfiquistas we've heard so far saying that was a penalty on. I have no problem admitting it, but at the same time, bro, Paulinho made a meal out of that. That to me is a no issue.
Yeah, I'm not saying it was a foul, but I'm just saying if you see someone hold their head, you should stop the game. And I don't think he let it go on for like 5 minutes or something, which I was annoyed at.
Let's got a perfect view, and he said he's yes. I'm not saying that's
no, that's fine. No, I agree. But then what I was saying was consistency because Rafa got hit in the head with a ball and he stopped it straight away. And I'm like, okay, whatever. You may have seen that one more clearly. I agree. But I agree there wasn't any consistency from him. But yeah, I don't think any team won or drew because of the referee. Obviously, we all had our chances, which we didn't take. You mentioned the Rafa and Jean Mario. We can talk about the Shumeti chance at the end. You know, we've got Edwards' chances as well. But yeah, I think the standard of officiating still does need to be better. But I assume you've probably been saying this for as long as I have, like the last 10 years, that we've all needed to know that.
I'm a little older than you, Sam. A lot longer than 10. Trust me.
Both teams going into this game with full strength teams. The only exception being Sporting. They missed Hidemasa Morita in midfield. Morita, for me, he's been Sporting's best signing by a country mile. Perhaps the only signing that has really delivered on the promise. Been really massive in that double pivot alongside Manuel Ugarte. With Morita out, Ruben Amorim made the decision to go with Pedro Gonçalves in the double pivot alongside Ugarte with Francisco Trincao, Paulinho, and Marcus Edwards. So Pedro Gonçalves obviously playing in a more withdrawn role, grabbing a penalty goal. I'm curious, Sam, what have you made of Pote this season? Because obviously, he joined Sporting in the summer of 2020, played an absolutely massive role in leading you guys to your first league title in 19 years. I believe 23 goals, if I'm not mistaken. Got that call up to the Euros. Since then, I feel like he has not been able to match the same levels, but he's still obviously one of Sporting's most important players. And I know that there were a lot of people when Pote was doing this in that Primera Liga championship saying, could this guy be their next Bruno Fernandes? Could he be as good as Bruno? I'm curious, what do you make of the Pote-Bruno comparisons? And also, how do you feel that Pote has done this season in what has been, let's face it, not a very convincing campaign for Ruben Amorim's men?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the comparisons with Bruno are unfair, but it's because obviously Bruno left the summer before, then Pot came in and still, like you said, scored all those goals. But obviously Bruno's going to be the much better player, and I don't think Pot will ever reach the level, unfortunately, of Bruno Fernandes. But from January last year, Pot has been out of form. He's a very streaky player. He'll have one game that you'll think he's the best player in the league. Next game, he won't have a shot on target and he'll just waste possession. I think he's a very good player. I don't know what it is, if it's due to fatigue or lack of confidence, but he's just not showing it anymore. He's a great penalty taker, as we saw this game. I feel maybe putting him in that role with Ugarte maybe does him a bit better than playing on the wing. But in all honesty, when Morita comes back, I hope Trincao is the one dropped, not Pot. So Pot plays on one of the wings. Maybe swap him and Edwards around, because Trincao, for the money that we will pay for him, he's again not shown anything to me. But Pedro Gonçalves, I think he's a streaky player. That's all it is. He's very much in and out of form all the time. I don't know I know he was linked to I think Arsenal last year. If I'm wrong, maybe that messed with his head, because I know it does sometimes happen to players in Portugal. But yeah, I think he does need to improve his game, and he's one of the people that when people criticize Amorim of having favourites, there's Paulinho, there's Esgaio at the moment, there's Trincao, and Pot is one of them that he never seems to get dropped, even though he'll be in awful form, whereas someone like Marcus Edwards, especially last year, was putting performance after performance, is still making the bench when Pot and Paulinho were still making the team. So I don't know, maybe a break on the sidelines is what Pot needs, maybe a few performances off the bench. I don't see it happening, unfortunately, but yeah, I think he needs to sort of buck up his ideas and get back to form, because he's really not showing it, especially for the last sort of year and a half.
Another player who played a massive role in Sporting's Primeira Liga title was João Mario, doing very well in the double pivot alongside João Palhinha. The two parties weren't able to come together on an agreement after his loan spell. He ended up going to crosstown rivals Benfica. Bit of a hot and cold first year. Fell out of favor under interim manager Nelson Veríssimo. A lot of rumors, is he going to leave Benfica? He ended up staying. He's been become an absolutely indispensable player under Roger Schmidt. Once again, playing the full 90 for Benfica. Cristiano, let's talk about João Mario, though, because this is a player who, he's played in Porto's academy. He's obviously made his name as a Sporting player, got that big money move to Inter, and came back to Sporting, led them to a title, and now potentially leading Benfica to a first league title in 4 years. What have you made of João Mario so far at Benfica, and just how important do you think he's been under Roger Schmidt?
First thing I would advise you is calminha, bro. Calma. When you say leading to a title, you think that he's the main man.
Actually, you are once again putting words in my mouth, my friend. There's a lot of people here. 50% done with the season. Benfica are 4 points ahead of Braga, 5 points ahead of Porto, 12 points ahead of Sporting. Okay, a lot can change, but it is a fact that Benfica are the odds-on favorite to win the Primeira Liga title.
Oh, that's fine. They are, and I sure as hell hope they do. But when you say leading, right? When I hear leading,
with this man, this is ridiculous.
I think he's had a really, really good season at Benfica. I think he shocked myself and many Benfiquistas who had no idea that he could take it back to this level. He was fortunate at the beginning of the season. Benfica weren't able to sign any wingers, and so therefore Roger Schmidt said, look, this is the guy's going to play on the left. He opted to switch Rafa into the middle, give him more of a free role. David Neres on one side, João Mario on the other side, and he's been, unlike many other seasons, even at Sporting, I think Sportingistas would agree with me, where he'd have spurts where he'd be fantastic, and then he'd have drops in his performance. So one thing that I think he's been able to do this year is be consistent, and he's been able to keep up that same level of play throughout most part. He wasn't particularly great in this last game, but he's all reliable, does what he has to do. I don't particularly like him on the wing because when I look at wing players and I think of a guy on the wing, he has to have the ability to beat a defender one-on-one. And we all know João Mario doesn't have the pace, nor does Ginga, to be able to do that. So I hope that, with this new Schlaudrup or whatever his name is that Benfica signed, he's able to do that, because we absolutely need another option on the wings and more options on this team, because as we saw against, again, in this game against Sporting, they decided to lose on Sunday. When Benfica goes to the bench, the options are very thin. So, all in all, I think it's been positive for João Mario. I think he's been really good. I am a guy that criticized him countless amount of times on the Benfica podcast, and there's not very much I could criticize the guy for this season. So credit to him for being a professional. That's the one thing I don't think anybody's ever accused him of being, is not being a professional. He's been exactly that. And so credit to Roger Schmidt for finding a way to plug him in and finding a way to get positive results from this guy. So far, so good. But as you mentioned, there's still half of the season to go.
Yeah, 100%. Benfica, as you mentioned, kicked off their January window with 2 Scandinavian signings, Andreas Schjelderup from Nordsjælland, as well as Kasper Tengstedt from Rosenborg. Seems like Tengstedt is more of a center forward replacement for Rodrigo Pinho, whereas Andreas is depth on the wings. I do think that that's probably the biggest issue for Benfica right now. It's having players who can change the game on the flanks, coming on against tired legs. You know, you've currently got a front 4 of João Mario, Frederic Arsnes, Rafa Silva, Goncalo Ramos. And I personally thought that Arsnes, I think Arsnes has been a very good signing so far. I thought he had one of his worst games in a Benfica shirt. Maybe the occasion fazed him, but Arsnes was taken off in the 65th minute for David Neres. I think that's probably the only real question mark right now in Roger Schmidt's strongest 11. Is Neres, a more traditional winger? Is he the right option, or is it Frederic Arsnes, someone who's kind of a central midfielder by trade? But anyways, David Neres came on in the 65th minute. Didn't really do that much. 0 out of 3 ground duels won. Lost possession 11 times, just 23 touches. Didn't really feel like he made a convincing argument to be a starter with that performance. And Benfica making their second substitution in the 93rd minute, Chiquinho coming on for Rafa Silva. Didn't really understand that either. But it's interesting because I think that the past few months we've been talking about how Benfica has better depth than Sporting. And yet Ruben Amorim made 4 substitutions, actually. Subbing off Mateus Reis for Jeremiah St. Just, new signing, as well as subbing off their entire front 3 and finishing the game with an attack of Arthur Gomes, Jovan Cabral, and Yusuf Chermiti. Chermiti, 18 years old, born in the Azores to Tunisian parents, if I'm not mistaken, and made his professional debut, his senior team debut for Sporting in this match. That's a massive occasion. So he's 18 years old, not even a full-fledged starter for the B team, and yet coming on, making his debut in a massive occasion. And he played about 20 minutes, got a yellow card, missed a pretty good opportunity. I don't think that we can judge Chermiti off the basis of his debut, but I will say I think that you have to compare teams. You have to compare the way that they're being shaped up. Benfica have Goncalo Ramos, okay, a player who has done very well this season, a player who has scored a hat-trick in a World Cup match, a player who is currently top scorer of the Primera Liga with 11 goals. Okay, so you've got a very good center forward. You've also got players such as Petar Musa, did very well for Boavista, Henrique Araujo, promising talent from the B team, as well as this new kid, Kasper Tengstedt. Okay, Braga, some very good center forward options, as well as Porto. Could mention Fran Navarro and Gil Vicente. And then we've got Sporting. Okay, we've got Sporting who have one center forward option in the entire squad, and that is Paulinho. Sam, I know you love Paulinho. I will let you get to Paulinho, but I just want to read off a current list of the top scorers in Sporting squad. Okay, in the Primera Liga. Pedro Gonçalves, 8 goals. Nuno Santos, 5 goals. Marcus Edwards, 5 goals. Hidemasa Morita, 3 goals. Francisco Trincao, 3 goals. Paulinho, 2 goals. And then you've got Mateus Nunes, Pedro Porro, Jeremiah St. Just, Rochinha, and Arthur Gomes tied with 1. So, Paulinho, this is a player who was brought in 2 years ago, January 2021, for a club record fee, I believe, of around 20 million euros. Only 2 goals so far this season. I was expecting Paulinho to be a nuisance in this match because he always is. He's scored against Benfica a few times, and I think he actually had gotten booked the last 3 times. But I think perhaps as concerning as that is, what's even more concerning is you don't really have that much competition for that position, Sam. You've got Rodrigo Ribeiro, I think 17, 18 years old, made some appearances for the first team last season, at the latter end of last season. And correct me if I'm wrong, I can't for the life of me remember Rodrigo Ribeiro playing significant minutes this season. I don't know. And of course, Chermiti coming on for his senior debut at 18 years old for Sporting in a, let's face it, a must-win game for Sporting. And then you have Ruben Amorim going out and saying, if Chermiti renews his contract, I will not search for a center forward. So to be honest with you, I know that every position is important in football. Me personally, I think that center forward is the most important position, at least in Portuguese football. If you don't have a guy who's going to put the team on your back and get goals for the team, you really are, you're shooting yourself in the foot, okay? You don't have that same firepower. Sam, I'm curious what you make of Sporting center forward situation. Do you feel that Paulinho is good enough to lead the line for your team? And what do you make of the other options? What do you make of how Amorim has handled this situation?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know me, I would say I'm Paulinho's number one fan. I do love the guy, and I think he isn't a good goal scorer, but I think he's a good player, if that makes sense. He annoys opposition, like he won the penalty against Antonio Silva. You could say it was clumsy, but I think it was also really clever play from Paulinho. He's very good at stuff like that. But I felt really bad for Chermiti coming on because he hadn't had a single minute. Like you said, it was his debut. He came on and he did scuff at the chance, he slipped, whatever. I did notice a lot of players were slipping on the pitch, actually, so I don't blame him too much. But then for Amorim to come out and say, we're not going to sign another striker if he renews, meanwhile putting a 5 million bid to, I can't remember the team in Denmark, for Diamonde, who currently plays at Marfa, is laughable because we don't need another centre-back. We've got, the 3 we have right now is good. We've just spent 10 million on Jeremiah St. Just, which is like one of the club's record fees, maybe like 4th or 5th. We've also got Luis Neto, who I know had his injury problems, had the collapsed lung, but should be coming back, and I still think he's a good serviceable backup option. And then for all of that to have, okay, let's say even Quaresma coming back from loan, that's going to be 6, 7 centre-backs and just one striker. Amorim told us in the summer that Jovan renewing his contract was going to be the second striker option. But in typical Jovan fashion, he gets injured straight away. I really don't like Jovan. I think he's not good enough to play at this level. I think he should have left when he had the chance, which was this summer, instead of renewing. I think Varandas and co were stupid to renew his contract because we knew he couldn't cut it. He had one good game from what I can remember about 3 years ago against Porto in the Taça da Liga or the Taça de Portugal. I can't remember which one it was. And since then, he's just been awful, in my opinion. And, I would love him to do well. I really would. But at this point, Jovan isn't ready to start. And yeah, like I said, I'm Paulinho's number one fan, but he needs to start scoring more goals. And the reason, I really thought he was going to turn it around when the Taça da Liga came and he scored against Braga. And I think he had 5 goals in 3 games, and he really was on fire. Then to come back to the league, Maritimo, we lost, obviously. Benfica, we drew, and he didn't score. It's just, he needs competition to sort of kick him into gear and be like, okay, you're not going to be starting forever, because no one believes Amorim's going to start Jovan or Chermiti or Rodrigo Ribeiro. And it makes me feel bad for these young kids because they're being put in the spotlight because of Paulinho not being able to score it, but also Ruben Amorim's poor squad planning. We have so many wingers, like you mentioned. We signed Rochinha for whatever reason. He barely gets any minutes. Otto Gomez barely gets any minutes. Nuno Santos is obviously very versatile, and I really like him. But we've got so many wingers. We've got so many defenders. Even we've got a lot of midfielders. We've got Tanalonga. We've got Sotiris. We've got Bragança coming back from injury, hopefully, probably next season. But we have one striker. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not even counting Chimetti and Rodrigo Ribeiro as options, because Rodrigo Ribeiro has never played more than 30 minutes in an entire starting game or for the main team. He's got a phenomenal record for the B team, and I think he will be a good player, but definitely not yet. And I think Amorim is to blame for this one, because even last year, Varandas sort of, we don't know what the story is, sort of pushed Slimani signing on him. It was very clear from last summer that Amorim did not want Islam Slimani. Slimani came in, Paulinho still wasn't dropped, even though Slimani scored 3 goals in 4 games. And obviously the whole fallout from that, and he had to be sold. But for some reason, Amorim just does not want another striker. I don't know if Cristiano knows why, or you know why. I just don't get it. For spending $5 million on a player who plays for Marfa, who is a good player in Diamonde, but is not a position we need to reinforce right now, especially when you just spent $10 million on an injury-prone centre-back. And I love St. Just, by the way. I think he's very good. But we've got a running theme in our Sporting 160.
Sorry, Sam. Do you think that he's done enough to be considered an upgrade over Mateus Reis? Because I know that Mateus had a bit of a shaky game. But St. Just, obviously he struggled with injuries. From what you've seen of him, though, looked a bit clumsy at the weekend, I must say. Do you think that he's got what it takes to lock down a starting spot in Sporting's defense?
I think 100%. I think I really like St. Just, and I think whenever he's actually played, he's fantastic. He's been phenomenal. Like you said, he's got on the score sheet. He goes on good runs like a fullback would, even though he's a centre-back, very good with the ball at his feet as well, very strong, very good in the air. But like you said, what I was going to say is we have a running theme on our podcast, which is guess which minute St. Just gets injured in, because he's never played 2 consecutive games. He always gets injured with something, and I don't know what it is. I know someone from who used to work in Sporting's medical facility said it might be a mental issue, like he's not actually getting injured, but he's just mentally thinking. I don't know if I buy that or not, but he is a good player, but he just can't stay fit. And there's going to be a time, if he doesn't get fit this season, if he can't play, let's say, more than 3 consecutive games, then we're going to have to look at either loaning him out or cutting our losses completely, I think.
Sam, you know what I take from this?
What's that?
You're too much of a nice guy, bro. You like everybody. You like everybody on the sport, bro. They're all bunch of bums, but you like them all.
I did tell you I did not like. I told you I didn't like Jovan. I really don't like Jovan.
You did. I'm sorry. I take that back. All right, you like almost everybody else,
apart from Jovan. Yeah, pretty much.
Jovan. And Amorim's decision not to get another striker.
I'm not going to lie. Amorim is wearing thin on me. To be honest, I know he's done a lot for the club. I'm not saying he hasn't. He's taken us to new heights. But if I was the president, which I'm not, I wouldn't have given this contract extension, especially the way we've been playing, the transfers he's made. I don't get it. I don't get why you would say, you know what, you're having a really bad season. We lost to a 2nd division or 3rd division team in the Taça de Portugal. A week after that, here goes a new contract. What does that send as a message as a club? That we're okay and we're fine with being mediocre or being bad, giving this manager sort of a safety blanket in case the season goes wrong? To me, that just tells me the season's done and we're going to go into the next season. But for me, I don't think he should have been given that safety blanket, and I think it sends the wrong message as a club, in my opinion anyway.
But he fits what the club wants. He's Portuguese, right? Mm-hmm. He promotes the kids.
He does, but he doesn't, though. He did it in his first season, but ever since then...
Yeah, but he's done it. So he's got a track record there. That's what I'm...
Yeah, I agree, but he hasn't done it recently enough. I know he put Chimetti in, but like I said, it's like throwing a guy in there who doesn't know how to swim in the deep end with no, inflatable armbands. He's just going to sink, and he did.
To me, you know what that reeked of? That reeked of... We're trying to convince the kid to stay at all costs. And look, we're throwing you in with the Wolves. Let's go. And maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't. I know Benfica, they tried that with the kid Moreira. That didn't work out. They sent him right back to the B team, and now he's not even playing. I don't even think he's an option anymore at the U19s and even on the B team. So sometimes it works. Other times it doesn't. But that's what it felt like to me.
It also reminded me of 2 years ago, now 5 years ago, when Rafael Leao made his debut against Porto and he scored.
Yeah, I remember. Uh-huh.
I thought maybe that's what he was trying to do. Maybe
Yes.
Yeah, maybe the kids, he's trying to get the kid to sort of play into the rivalry mentality that a lot of other people won't have. But to me, yeah, I felt bad for him, sort of chucking him in the deep end and expecting results.
Let's be honest about something though, right? what other alternative did you have besides the 18-year-old striker? He's the only other striker on the bench.
That's what I'm saying. It's January. Like this, like you've made 2 signings already. One of them is a striker, and we were linked to that same striker. Apparently, I don't believe it too much, but like we're trying to send money, 5 million to a team in Denmark for a centre back. That needs to go on a striker.
Benfica's got a plethora of centre backs, and maybe you guys hoping to be able to replicate what Benfica's done with the boatload of centre backs, and only 2 of them can play. But yeah,
but I will give a shout out to Rui Costa because he's been a great businessman for Benfica ever since taking over. Like he rejected the Enzo Fernandez move. It would have been easy to just say, you know what, take the money. He stayed firm with the clause. Whereas Varandas, I don't know, like with our best players, been selling them for below the release clause. Palhinha for 20 million now looks stupid.
You're not letting go of Porro. Tottenham is hot after him, and it's a $5 million difference, and the offer's 40. You guys want 45 for his clause. That's what his clause says. So I guess your president is standing firm.
I will be surprised if he does leave for the clause, to be honest. But
I want to just say
that's just me.
I think Sam, you brought up a good point, and with regards to Chermiti, like I said, you can't write off a player just because he looked like a deer in the headlights in one of the highest pressure games in European football. And also, if Chermiti just squares that ball instead of just taking a wild shot into Rosie, Sporting win this game, and we could be talking about Ruben Amorim as some kind of genius. I know that's obviously not what happened. That's the reality of it. But I do think that there's a fine line between throwing a player into the deep end and, genuinely giving them opportunities to shine. And I think that Goncalo Ramos is an interesting foil because Goncalo Ramos, he's somebody who a lot of Portuguese fans, they've been talking about him for a while. Was a goal-scoring phenom in the B teams. A lot of Benfica fans saying, when is he finally going to get his opportunity? When is he finally going to get his chance? Didn't really get it under Jorge Jesus. Started to play regularly, I think, in the latter end of last season, scoring a decent amount and almost operating as a second striker behind Darwin Nunez. Darwin gets sold for a massive amount. Benfica used that money to rebuild the squad in key areas, bringing in the likes of Alexander Ba, Enzo Fernandez, Frederic Arsnes, as well as the promising Croatian striker Petar Musa from Boavista. And yet it hasn't been Musa, it's been Goncalo Ramos, the Benfica Academy product, leading the line and currently leading the Primeira Liga scoring charts, and had an absolutely massive game with a brace to give Benfica a much-needed point against their rivals, and obviously keeping them 4 points clear of Braga. Cristiano, talk to me a little bit about Goncalo Ramos. What have you made of him this season? Obviously, there are plenty of fans of Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, top-tier European sides who are watching this thing. Could Goncalo Ramos be that guy to fix our center forward issues? So I'm curious, do you think that Goncalo Ramos is ready for a move? And just how do you feel he's evolved this season under Roger Schmidt?
I'm afraid I might be the wrong Benfica fan for you to ask a question about Goncalo Ramos, because I don't have him that high on the list as a lot of other people do.
Really?
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the book on Goncalo Ramos in front of me now, but if I'm not mistaken, Goncalo, because you mentioned he really didn't get many opportunities prior to Verissimo. But if I'm not mistaken, I think the year prior, Goncalo Ramos was a midfielder. I think Benfica swapped him and moved him up the pitch in recent years. I don't think he's always been a striker in the youth system at Benfica. But nonetheless, look, the guy's work rate is second to none. I think that's the one thing that we could all see Goncalo Ramos play in, week in, week out, and we appreciate that he brings it his best and puts in the shift every single game. Obviously, scores a lot of goals, but I think he could work on a lot of his finishing. I think it's still not one of his strongest suits. He scores goals because the guy never stops. He's always in the right position. He's always moving around. He finds himself in front of the goal. He finds himself with loose balls. And so, look, credit to him. That's what it takes for him to be successful. And Benfica so far has been successful with him playing in that way. But in terms of, making a big money switch, I don't know. There's just something about him that I don't see that'll translate into a big money move. I think, again, his finishing is not the greatest. I think his decision making at times is not the greatest. And when you can look at a player, the best compliment you have to give him is his work rate. I think that's a red flag. He's scoring goals in Portugal. Credit to him. Benfica creates a ton of opportunities. And he's doing just enough to get Benfica on the board and to get himself to the top of the leaderboard. But in terms of spectacular player and all that, I'm the wrong person to ask about that because I don't see that player.
I definitely think he's got a lot to improve on. I was saying a few months back that I thought Petar Musa should be given some more genuine chances to compete with him. But the fact is, the stats do not. Goncalo Ramos, top scorer of the Primeira Liga charts with 11 goals, as well as number one for expected goals at 12.5. I see what you mean.
Yeah, that's
with that being said, Darwin Núñez got a 75 million euro move with 25 million in add-ons, with some pretty glaring deficiencies in his game. Okay, Liverpool did not pay that money for the Darwin of today. They paid it for the Darwin of today as well as the next 10 years or so. Goncalo Ramos is 21, okay? He's performing at a decent level, and I think that there is some understanding amongst clubs like Manchester United, like, okay, we know that Goncalo, he isn't Erling Haaland yet, but he's still doing very well at a top European league, and that may just be enough to get him a big money move. I think that when you look at Benfica's current situation, they've got Henrique Araújo, another promising striker from the academy. Petar Musa, a player they paid a decent amount of money for from Boavista, as well as this new kid, Kasper Tengstedt. That's 3 center forwards. You got to think that from Benfica's standpoint, the plan is to sell Goncalo.
Yeah.
We know that.
We know that.
Yeah.
We all know that. Of course, we know that. That is the plan.
But so that Goncalo isn't entitled to that move when Darwin got it? How do you compare Goncalo and Darwin right now?
Nobody's entitled to anything. First of all, I think he'll make a move. I think that's Benfica's objective. I think there's teams that are salivating all over themselves because of the performances that he put in against that Switzerland in the World Cup. But again, when you watch someone week in, week out, you see their deficiencies. You see what it is that they lack in their game. And when you're comparing them to a Darwin Núñez, again, another guy that I was not a huge fan of. I've never been a huge fan of Darwin. But when comparing the two, Darwin was elite in terms of physicality. Yeah. The dude's a horse. Pace, physicality, strength. The dude he was doing it at the highest stage. He was beating, the Barcelona defenders, the Liverpool defenders. He was playing at the highest level in Champions League football. And again, when you saw his deficiencies in front of goal, but you looked at his speed, at his ability to beat defenders one-on-one with his pace and his physicality, I think that's why Liverpool splashed the cash, because in the EPL, you don't necessarily need to have the Mojinga on your feet. You just got to be able to beat somebody to a ball. You got to be able to body people off the ball. You got to be able to put the ball in the back of the net at times. But a lot of it has to do with just getting to the spot first in the opposition, and he does that. I think Goncalo Ramos is very good in that department. I think, as I mentioned before, he's agile, he's mobile. The guy's all over the pitch, presses like no one else on Benfica. He's extraordinary in that department. But I don't think he's as good as, at least I say physically, I don't think he's as developed as a Darwin Núñez was. I think Darwin Núñez is a special creature. The dude's just a freak. Now, can he score? No, that's the $1 million question, and that's why I've never been his biggest fan. But in terms of what the guy can do physically, yeah, he's a horse, man. A lot different than Goncalo Ramos, in my opinion. Just much better, a much better athlete.
Sam, what are your thoughts on Goncalo Ramos? Do you think that he's good enough to lead the line for Portugal at the moment?
I don't know, because there's quite a lot of players that are sort of up and coming, and I know like, for example, Felix pretty much has his position locked in Portugal for the next, 5, 10, however many years. You've also got players like Beto who are tearing up in the Serie A. It remains to be seen where he can go. I think his next step could be to like a Premier League team. He's looked really impressive. But yeah, I think Gonzalo Ramos has a really high ceiling, and I think he is working. I feel like he's getting better each game at least. Like the confidence he showed against Switzerland in the World Cup, like he just looked fantastic. Like, and I'm pretty sure that's where most of the rumours come from, like Man United, Liverpool, Newcastle, all those rumours came from. I think he just got to work on his development, and I think a big thing for Portuguese youngsters is not leaving to join these big clubs too early, and it sort of like stifles their development. You can sort of look at that maybe with João Felix going to Atletico Madrid wasn't the right fit for the player. And at the moment, there are a lot of question marks regarding Felix. I obviously think Felix is a fantastic player. But at the moment, it's like his development has been stopped because of his move. And I think Gonzalo Ramos and his agent have to make the right move if it is leaving Benfica. Personally, maybe stay for another year if that's an option. But yeah, I really do like Gonzalo Ramos. I think he's a really good player. He gets into great attacking positions. His finishing does need a bit of work, I will say. But I think overall he's got a very high ceiling, and as long as he sort of sticks to that development, and if he does go to a project, it needs to be someone that progresses. Newcastle might be the option for him, maybe. I wouldn't really like to see him go to like a Manchester United or Liverpool. I feel like Manchester United, as well as Erik ten Hag has done, I don't feel like it should be a really like an appetizing place for a player to go at the moment, just because there's still so many question marks around the whole United team. But yeah, as long as he continues his development, I think he will be. He's pretty much locked in to be a starter, maybe with João Felix. And who knows, apparently Ronaldo is looking to play the next Euros or World Cup, so it might be him, but hopefully Roberto Martinez.
See, I don't think Newcastle is the right place for him at all. Because Newcastle is a top 4 finish away from really splashing the cash, and they'll get eaten alive. I think, they're going to get top tier players. When you talk about Gonçalo Ramos making a move, you got to go to those clubs that do believe in giving kids an opportunity. The clubs that don't have that pressure of challenging for a title. And that's really the best way for kids to challenge. And that's why, when you talk about, Zach mentioned before, Sporting giving a lot of kids opportunities, as Benfica is just really lately, it's one per season most of the times. I know this year you get, throw in Antonio Silva and whatnot. But the pressure that Benfica has on a yearly basis is a much, much different pressure than what Sporting has. Sporting, it's kind of, I think the fan base has really accepted the fact that you're a developmental club that's going to promote from within, and you're patient with your players. And if you challenge for a title, that's great. But if you don't, that's not the end. That's not the end. That's not the end of it. Just like you mentioned this year, feels like that. Amorim and Varandas, by giving them the contract extension, they've kind of already reset and looking forward into the future. Benfica has the pressure year in, year out of always win. Doesn't matter. Yeah. They, if they're booty or not, the fans, everybody is expected to challenge for that title, even when they're 10 points behind. It is. I mean, you look in years past, Porto would have a huge lead, and the lead story is still Benfica. It's not the first place team. It's everything is on Benfica. It's two totally different pressure. And so I think Gonçalo Ramos will do well. You get teams like Dortmund who develop players well. Mm-hmm. I think a team today, you talk about a team, and obviously a top 6 team in the EPL, they're in first place this year, but a team that does play youth and pressures a lot, and I think Gonçalo Ramos will do well, is at Arsenal. I think you put them in a team like that. Newcastle, again, maybe for this season, for the rest of the season, wouldn't be a bad shout. But if they do finish top 4, that oil money is going to get spent, baby. They're spending that money on anything and everybody, okay? And so that's why I don't think it's a good option for him to go there, because once they do reach those heights, it'll just be another one, it'll just be forgotten about. So, yeah, look, he's got a high upside. I just think that there's still a lot there to be worked on.
Yeah, just one thing before we move on, it's okay. I'm really sick of Portuguese players going to Wolves. I don't want to see any players go to Wolves. Just go somewhere else, man. Like, I'm sick of it. Especially like sporting players as well. Mateus Nunes, got Rui Patricio going there, and obviously like they weren't directly, but like Podence, Moutinho, etc. So yeah, I hope that stops.
You know what? I wanted to bring up a question you had, Sam, because actually I got a question from one of my followers yesterday, Raj Chauhan, who asked, do you blame Ruben Amorim for Sporting being off the page, or is it down to squad quality, having lost João Palhinha and Matheus Nunes? Sporting obviously losing their two starting midfielders in João Palhinha going to Fulham and Matheus Nunes going to Wolves. Matheus being sold to Wolves literally 2 days before their match against Porto, and which of course they lost. But I'm curious, how big do you think those two sales have impacted your season, Sam?
Yeah, well, like to the ultimate question, which was, do I blame Ruben Amorim for it? I do, but not all on him. I think it's probably about maybe a 60-40 split, maybe Veranda's getting the 60 and Amorim getting the 40. And here's where I'll go with this, because Amorim chose to bring Trincao in, and he's not worked. He chose to bring Esgaio in, he's not worked. There are players that he's chose to bring in that just haven't worked. But on the flip side, we sold João Palhinha for, 20 million euros, which now, João Palhinha has been one of the best midfielders, in my opinion, this season in the Premier League, and should have got more time with Portugal as well, I think, in the World Cup. And he's probably going to go to, the rumour is, to Liverpool or Man United for double that. Same with Matheus Nunes, but I think his was even worse because it was right before the game against Porto that Amorim sold him, and then now he's going to go to Liverpool for probably 50, 60 million. So I think squad planning is an issue in Amorim, but player sales and negotiations especially. Like if let's go back a year. 10 million for Ruben Vinagre for 50% of his pass is an awful deal no matter how good he became. 50% for 10 million is awful. Even if you look at players like Pedro Gonçalves, who we all think is, a lot of us think is a good player, still, he's probably, he's worth 50 million, and we've only got 50%, so that's going to be 25. Same with Ugarte. Like, we're not going to make money from these players. We're going to make money, but we're also financing for Militao if Pot and Ugarte go. And we're not getting all this money because, at the end of the day, Verandas has done good in terms of winning trophies in not just football, but all the modalities that goes on. But he is an awful negotiator. And I think when teams do come to do business sport and they rub their hands because they're like, we can get a bargain here, like Fulham did for João Palhinha or Wolves Matheus Nunes, or even back. I still think Nuno Mendes for 40 million is still a bad deal, even though we got Sarabia on loan, who was fantastic. But 40 million for probably will be one of the best left backs in world football in the next 4 or 5 years is horrendous.
Left backs in world football.
Exactly, and like. I'm sick of this negotiation of buying 50% of players, because we've done it with Marcus Edwards as well. And the rumour is Marcus Edwards going back to Tottenham. Because Tottenham already own 50%, that's 25 million for a player like Marcus Edwards is ridiculous. And this is where I was saying earlier, like to Rui Costa's credit, he's a very good negotiator. He's brought in players like Enzo Fernandez, who he can sell for 120 million as his release clause. Meanwhile, I said this on my podcast last week, that I think Pedro Porro can start for pretty much any team, maybe a few in the Premier League that he wouldn't get into. And he's got a release cost of 45 million, obviously, unless it's City, which would be 25. Why is Verandas setting the bar so low for these players, like 45 million? Because he's got the same release clause as well as Edwards has. Whereas I don't like to make everything about Bruno Carvalho, Verandas, but Bruno Carvalho, every play he brought in, 120 million release clause. Even Brian Ruiz, who was 32 years of age, like it was just a thing that he did to sort of secure like financial like stability, and we managed to get 45 million for João Mario, 30 million for Slimani and Adrian. But I just don't know what Verandas is planning here. And let's say we don't make Europe, we're going to need to sell players to keep the books afloat. And like I said, we're selling half of players. We're selling 50%. Ugarte, I think we could all agree, is probably the most valuable player in this squad at the moment. Let's say he goes for 60 million, we're only going to get 30. Because of the 50% dealing with Militao. And I think it does go up with objectives, so maybe it's at 60%. But why can't we just buy a whole player for 100% and then flip him? I know it's a bit more expensive, but in the long run, I mean, it works out. But yeah, for me, I would say, actually, I'm going to say 70% Verandas, 30% Ruben Amorim.
When Bruno Carvalho was around, the banks were just giving you guys free money, but Anders doesn't have the same relationship with the banks. That's what it is. You guys keep getting $120 million, 20 million euro loans, and then you pay it back 30 cents on the dollar.
Yeah,
but maybe that has something to do with it.
And Sam, just to butt in, another of the most valuable players on the Sporting team is Pedro Gonçalves, who, if you do eventually sell it, you're going to have to split that bill significantly with Famalicão. Sam, you keep on bringing up Francisco Trincão. I want to bring up his stat sheet from the Benfica game. 1 shot off target, 1 shot blocked, 1 big chance missed. 0 out of 3 successful dribbles completed. 0 out of 1 crosses completed. 2 fouls. And finally, 1 out of 9 ground duels won. So, I'll be honest with you. I would probably say that Trincão has been one of the most disappointing signings in all of Portugal this summer. I think that, I'd put him up there with potentially Julian Draxler on Benfica, David Carmo on Porto, maybe throw in a few other players like Diego Lainez, but I think that Trincão is the big one because just a few years ago, he lit up this same league under Ruben Amorim while he was at Braga. He earned a move to Barcelona. Everybody was saying, this is going to be the last we see of Trincão in Portugal for a while. Didn't really manage to crack in at Barcelona. Didn't manage to turn it around at Wolves either. Went back to Sporting, and I think, similarly to Vinagre, returning, leaving England and trying to, make a go of it in his return to Portugal. It hasn't really worked out for him. And one thing that's been kind of bizarre to me is whenever I watch Sporting games, it always seems to me like Trincão is one of the last players to exit the pitch, if he does exit the pitch. Whereas someone like Marcus Edwards, who, I recognize he hasn't been amazing, but I would argue that he's been better than Trincão this season. He typically gets withdrawn a few minutes before, and just to so Trincão lasted 89 minutes against Benfica. Edwards lasted 78. I'm curious, what have you made of this situation? Do you feel like Amorim has shown in any ways sort of form favoritism towards Trincão? Do you feel that in on the other hand, he's been a bit unfair with Edwards?
Yeah, 100%. To the favoritism question, I 100% there's a favoritism, and we saw it last year with Paulinho and Slimani as well. Slimani was clearly on better form, and he still started Paulinho, which led to the fallout. I'm not saying Slimani was 100% in the right to leave, but I can understand where he came from. And like I mentioned earlier, it's been the same with Pedro Gonçalves when last year he was having bad performance after bad performance, and Marcus Edwards was coming on, scoring goals, assisting, and he was still making the bench. And this is a lot of Sporting fans' gripe with Ruben Amorim, is that he does have favourites. One of them, if I can name off the top of my head, so we've got Pedro Gonçalves, we've got Trincão, we've got Ricardo Esgaio to an extent. I'm just trying to think. Those are the 3 I'll say right now are like the main ones that every time, no matter if they have a bad game, they'll be back on. Esgaio, I know, is a bench player, and so I guess you can't really put him in the same vein as the other two. But Trincão and Pedro Gonçalves have proven that they've had really bad performances and they've not improved. Whereas I see players on the bench like Artur Gomes, who, when he had come on, for example, game against Spurs, he scored that wonder goal and really hasn't got that many opportunities. Another one who's just disappeared off the face of the earth is Rochinha. I barely see him anymore, and I really did like what I saw from him at Guimarães, and I think he's a very good player, but for some reason does not get into the team anymore. But I just don't get it. I don't understand why, especially, like we said, the season's a wrap for Sporting at the moment. I think the opportunity is to try and get third place, but even so, that looks like maybe out of the question at the moment as well. So why aren't we giving these other players a chance, like Artur Gomes, Rochinha, Fatau, even someone from, like we've mentioned, the B team, if you want to give more opportunities to Chimetia, Rodrigo Ribeiro. But for me, I don't know what's wrong with Trincão. A lot of people said because of the way Bruno Lage played with him at Wolves, maybe it was a confidence issue. But we're halfway through the season now, and I'm sick and tired of waiting for him to gain confidence back. You either have it or you don't. And I think at the moment he doesn't have it. And I think he needs to be dropped for, I would say, Otto Gomez, or maybe bring up Nuno Santos to the left wing. You said he's got 5 goals, and I think he's been probably one of our best players, if not like the best versatile player that we have in Nuno Santos. So I think time's running out for Trincao. I believe that the deal is going to be made permanent anyway if we don't get relegated, which, I mean, like, another great deal from Varandas, and I believe it's only for 50% again. So it's another for Trincao, sorry. So Trincao was a loan with the obligation to buy if we don't get relegated, I believe, for 10 million for 50% of his pass.
Yikes. Yeah, the less said about Trincao, the better. I want to switch to a Benfica player, though. He's a player who came over from Spain 7 years ago and bit by bit has emerged as, in my opinion, the best left back in Portuguese football. And that is Alex Grimaldo, currently 27 years of age. I know I've talked a lot about him, the good and the bad, especially with Cristiano here. But I just want to point out what he is doing because, he got the vital assist setting up Goncalo Ramos' second goal, and overall has really continued to develop, in my opinion, going forward as well as defensively, becoming, for me, a much more complete defender under Roger Schmidt, which I think had always been the biggest, what if about his game. There are a few left backs who I think influence the game more than Grimaldo. And, you can see that in just looking at the stats. 7 big chances created already this season in the Primera Liga. In terms of key passes, he's got 2.4 key passes per game. Only Pedro Gonçalves, Otavio, and Ricardo Horta have more in the Primera Liga. And I think the biggest thing to note, or one of the biggest things, is Grimaldo's contract expires in the summer. So he can technically sign a pre-contract with any club right now. I don't think he would do that. I think that he's the kind of guy to, wait for the offers to pop up. But I do think that he will probably leave Benfica on a free transfer this summer. He's in the prime of his career, and I think that there's going to be a lot of teams interested in his services because he's doing quite well. Cristiano, I know that you haven't always been the biggest fan of Alex Grimaldo, neither have I, but I'm curious, has your opinion changed at all this season, and what have you made of Grimaldo's performances under Roger Schmidt?
Yeah, absolutely. He's absolutely had a spectacular season for Benfica this season. As I mentioned with João Mario earlier, I think this is another player that did have his critics coming into the season, but I think the combination of Roger Schmidt with the combination, which I think there's a bigger percentage of this than anything else for his success, which is the fact that he is free to walk at the end of the year. And you see it in every sport, not just in soccer. You see it in other sports that when guys on the last year of their contract, everything seems to go well. These guys are able to stay consistent throughout the season. And look, he's got to do what he's got to do. He's got to look for the best opportunity for him, for his future, for his family. I do agree with you. I do think he leaves at the end of the season. But to his credit, he's making sure that these last 12 months at the club are special. He is finally putting it all together. I recall on social media and in podcasts getting into the rift, back and forth, the gibberish of, Grimaldo is a set piece specialist. And I used to laugh. A guy that scores a goal every 3 years on a set piece, that is not exactly what I call a set piece specialist. But this year, he's been on the mark. And so credit to him, credit to the coaching staff. But yeah, I think we're all shocked. We're all surprised because I didn't think he had it in him. But again, that signing bonus and that opportunity to sign a new contract elsewhere, that is a motivating factor that we can't all just ignore.
100%. In my opinion, Grimaldo is the best left back in the Portuguese league, and I think that the best right
what are the options?
In the
what are the other options? It's like he wins by default. What are the who's Sporting's left back?
Santos.
Santos. Come on, dude. He's not even a weapon. He's like a wing back.
Yeah.
But yeah. Who does Porto have? I don't even know what Porto has nowadays. Who?
Zaidu Sanusi. He's the guy who scored the goal at to win the title for Portugal last season. You may have remembered him.
Sam, typical Portista answer. I wouldn't.
Hey, I literally said that Grimaldo is the best left back, and Sam. Cristiano has recorded.
Right?
There isn't a single podcast he's recorded where he isn't putting words in my mouth or roasting.
I love you, because I love you, Zach. You're my favorite Zach Lowy on Twitter. How's that? There's like 100. You're my
competition
favorite, bro.
is so high. But because I wanted to say before Cristiano cut me off, I think that the best right back in Portugal is Spanish as well. Pedro Porro doing it once again. I think that there are very few players in Sporting squad that I look at them and I think, oh, this guy is the best in his position in Portugal by a mile. But that's Pedro Porro, one of the few players actually who is still remaining from that Sporting Primeira Liga championship team. You got a few others such as Sebastian Coates, Gonçalo Inácio, Antonio Adan, and more. But I think that Porro is perhaps the only one who has really stayed consistent in terms of his performances. He has a 45 million euro release clause. Sporting have been pretty adamant that they're only going to sell him for the release clause. Hopefully they can hang on to him until the end of the season. I'm not so sure if they can. I expect them to, but you never know in football. Ultimately, though, I think that it will be kind of a similar case to, for example, Vitinha. Vitinha getting sold to Paris Saint-Germain. He gets sold for the full value of his release clause, and yet you're thinking, man, couldn't we have sold him for a bit more? And that's where I think that, for example, Benfica would not have allowed Porro to have such a low release clause. But, it's besides the point. I think that Porro, he's been so good for Sporting in that right wing back position. People, they always ask me, Porro is playing wing back. Could he do it in a back four? For me, I have no hesitation. I think he absolutely could. Because defending, to analyze a defender, you have to look at certain aspects, right? How is he going to use his body to win a throw in? How is he going to track back and bend his run to cut off this attack, And Porro, he's got all the fundamentals for me. I think that it's clear that in today's game we expect fullbacks to do more attacking than defending, but he's a balanced player, and I think that I expect him to get a transfer because, frankly, for my money, he's already one of the best right backs in football. And I'm gonna go say it right now. Okay, I like Luis Enrique a lot. I think he did a fine job with Spain, but one of his biggest issues, one of his biggest problems in his time as Spain manager was not calling up Pedro Porro for the World Cup. Okay? I'm sorry. Pedro Porro is 3 times the right back that Cesar Azpilicueta or Dani Carvajal are. Okay?
Agreed.
He's miles ahead of them. I'm not taking away from them. They were good players a few years back. But we're in 2023 right now. Pedro Porro is a much better player than either Carvajal or Azpilicueta. And frankly, it's funny because Spain, they got knocked out in the round of 16 by Morocco. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that Marcos Llorente was playing right back in that game. So, you know what? I'm sorry. But I found that to be kind of disrespectful of the Primeira Liga. I recognize that Luis Enrique is not watching Primeira Liga games in his spare time, but fact is, if he did, he would have recognized that Porro is the best right back that Spain has, and one of the best right backs in world football. So, Sam, talk to me just how good is Pedro Porro. Do you expect him to leave soon?
I think it's inevitable, especially if you would have asked me before the North London derby and Spurs, let's say, held out for a point or one, then I would say maybe not. But I think the alarm bells are ringing at Tottenham at the moment, especially with their recent form. I think they need Pedro Porro or signing in general. But I think 45 million for him is a steal, especially in Premier League clubs. That's like pocket change to most of them, especially the top 6 clubs. And as I said, if you look down the Premier League, he starts, I would say, for every team, maybe bar 2 or 3. And to be honest, if I'm Man City, I see Kyle Walker getting older. Cancelo's been in and out of form. If you've literally got him for like half the price, get for like 22, 23 million, I don't understand why they're not saying, yeah, we're going to activate that, because I think he'd fit them more perfectly than maybe a Tottenham. I don't know if Porro will really do well with Tottenham. Not saying that Tottenham aren't like a good team and Conte's not a good manager. Just at the moment, I don't see Tottenham and think, you know what, it's an attractive destination for a player to go to. But I think Spurs definitely need Pedro Porro. Wherever Pedro Porro wants to move, I mean, let's be real. When money's involved, none of us really know the answer apart from it's probably like Cristiano said, like it's life-changing money. I'm not going to hold it against him if he wants to move to the Premier League. Probably get a double salary, a massive signing on bonus. You know, he's been a fantastic servant to the club. He's won us a league title, won us a Taça de Ligas and the like. Like you said, should have been called up for Spain. But like he's just fantastic offensively and solid enough defensively that I think he does well. Wherever he can do it in a back 4, I agree with you saying that I think he can, but I reckon there's going to be a little time to get used to playing in a back 4, especially the way he plays for Sporting. He's bombing up and down that wing all the time, and he's also a really good finisher of the ball as well. We saw him take that free kick, which Oddy punched away. I mean, it wasn't really close to going in, but he's scored long-range efforts. He's very good in front of goal, like in the 6-yard box. He's a great player, and I think definitely I don't understand why other teams aren't coming in for him, even teams like abroad from England, because he's just that good of a player. And I guarantee in the next 2 to 3 years, he's going to be one of, if not the best right backs. He's going to be in that conversation.
100%. I want to pivot to another Spanish-speaking player and another player who has been the subject of quite a few transfer sagas this month, and that is Enzo Fernandez. Enzo Fernandez, alongside Nicolas Otamendi, became the first ever Primera Liga player to win the World Cup and the third player to win the World Cup and the young player of the tournament alongside Pelé and Kylian Mbappe. So obviously he did himself a lot of good with that impressive showing for Argentina in the World Cup. Came back, immediately linked to Chelsea. It seemed like Chelsea, they were going to, put in a bid. They were going to get the deal done. I'll be honest, I was expecting him to be playing for Chelsea at the moment. And I think that maybe if Benfica's president was still Luis Felipe Vieira, maybe he would be a Chelsea player. But Rui Costa has held firm and has made it so that Enzo remains a Benfica player at the moment. Came in, and I felt it wasn't his best performance against Sporting. But with that being said, I really did feel that he grew into the game and was actually one of Benfica's better players in the second half, especially 6 tackles, 8 out of 12 ground duels won, 8 out of 14 long balls completed. I mean, I think that Enzo Fernandez is one of the best players I've seen in Portugal for quite some time. And I remember watching him for the first time in Benfica's league opener against Arauca and just thinking, oh yeah, this kid is not going to be here when next season starts. Cristiano, how do what do you think of the way that Benfica have handled this Enzo situation? How do you feel that he has responded since being brought back into the team? I know that he missed. He was left out of the team for the 1-0 win against Portimonense, but he came back for the cup win against Varzim and started, and I think did fairly well against Sporting.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everybody at the club has to be applauded for the way they've handled this, from the coaching staff to the president. I understand some Benfiquistas initially weren't too pleased with the way that Enzo handled this whole situation, his agent. But I mean, if we sit back and we look at the whole situation, we understand that that's today's football. Clubs come in, they destabilize, they make these huge offers, and it's, and these offers are not just going to change your immediate future. This is going to change the rest of your life. And so when you're looking at the type of money that allegedly was thrown at Enzo Fernandez, I mean, that would really screw any player's mind up. And he was going to do everything he could to get his tail out of Lisboa and go into London and get those huge paydays. Now, Benfica handled it correctly. I thought that they needed to make an example of this whole situation. There was no way he could have played against Famalicão. It was Famalicão, right? At home on a Friday that he got suspended for that one game. He didn't get called up for that one game. I think it was Famalicão.
Yeah. Are you talking about Enzo? I think he missed out on the Portimonense game, no?
Oh, Portimonense. I'm sorry, Portimonense. Famalicão, Portimonense, whatever. Who cares? Same thing. He didn't play that Friday, and I thought Benfica handled it well. He had to send a message to the youngsters and even other players that are potentially looking at joining Benfica. This is a perfect example of a player that's on top of the world at the moment, as you mentioned, with all his accolades from the World Cup and whatnot. And if Benfica is able to discipline this guy and show him who's boss, a guy at the top of his game, imagine all the other guys, all the other schmucks in the locker room looking around. So credit to them for handling it well. Credit to him for coming back, bouncing back, and being able to be a professional and getting the fan base back on his side. He had a really good game for Benfica against Sporting. Not one of his best, but you could tell there's a lot of, like, Enzo's the type of player, guys, that if you're looking for, jugadas bonitas, right? Pretty on the ball and all that stuff, he's not going to fill your eyes with joy. You just have to watch how he plays, how simple he makes everything around him look. Off the ball, the one thing about him is his vision. I say this often. Every pass that Enzo makes, 9 out of 10 passes, I should say, is with an objective of going forward. It is into a place on the field, on the pitch, where it alleviates pressure. I often tell people that there's a difference between playing simple 1-2 touch, right? Which is just, I'm getting rid of it. I'm playing one touch and I'm giving it to you. You got 2-3 guys around you. Yeah, I look pretty. I got rid of a one touch. But I put the ball into a danger zone. I put you into a very delicate situation where on the stat books, you're going to look like you're the one that's really turning the ball over. But it was my asinine pass that puts you in that position. And so Enzo, on the other hand, every time he plays the ball, it seems he's playing it into space, into someone that could go forward, and Benfica could obviously start the counter or the attack in possession. And so he's just a spectacular player to watch. I'm happy that he's sticking around for a little while longer. But again, I'm not naive to think that Benfica is not selling him. I mean, I said it while this whole saga was going on the Benfica podcast. I would have taken 90 million in Ziyech. And you know what I mean? Call it a day. You're talking about a player that Benfica initially invested 10 million with objectives would have brought it up to 18 million. Now you're turning around and selling them 5-6 months later for 90 million plus a player like Ziyech, who gives you everything you need on the other side of the field. Now you got him and you got Neres on one side. Think about how.
Sorry, you're talking about which player, Cristiano?
Ziyech.
Ziyech. From Chelsea.
Ziyech. Yeah, that guy.
Just
the Moroccan. How's that? The Moroccan.
Just want to point out, when Benfica do eventually sell Enzo, they're going to have to give River Plate 25%. So it wouldn't be 90 million. It would be.
Oh, I know. It'd be probably like around 70 something. 70,
exactly.
68, 70, whatever. The point, but at the end of the day, you're still selling them for 90. You give the 25% to River. You bring a Ziyech, and now you still got 70 million in your pocket. You could turn around and go invest that money in another quality player in the midfield. Yeah. Just think about how much stronger you are. So I'm not opposed to doing that. But again, the club right now is in a very good position. We've advanced in the Champions League, made a boatload of money in the Champions League, very well positioned in the league, in the Taça da Liga, very well positioned in the league. Obviously, we had the misfortune of dropping out of the Taça da Cerveja, the Taça da Liga. And so you have to look and understand at what it is, right, and what league. Yeah. The Portuguese league has become a feeder club, as much as it pains us to say it, to admit it. Yeah. And Benfica, as huge as they might be, we are a feeder club. We are a club that depends on selling players in order to keep our books afloat. Either that or win the Champions League. You know what I mean? And so,
every single club. What I will say though is every single club in the Primeira Liga, every single club in Portugal is a feeder club. Okay. When you compare Portugal to the big leagues, not only are they far behind financially compared to the top 5, they're far behind leagues like Greece and Turkey. So that's why for a Portuguese team, I'm not sure if it makes that much sense to accept someone like Hakim Ziyech, because you need to be. I realize that he's a good player and all, but would you rather have someone like Hakim Ziyech, who's 28 or 29, or someone like Andreas Schler? I'm not even going to pretend to say his name.
Here's
somebody who you can actually make a quick buck on in the future.
You can have both. In my scenario, you have both.
Okay.
And here's the thing.
And here's for you with Julian Draxler, right?
I'm sorry.
That's worked out very well for you with Julian Draxler.
So again, I'm gonna use the example I use on a Benfica podcast. Your wife cheats on you. You're never gonna hook up with another woman for the rest of your life. So yeah, Draxler went bad. There's plenty of others that went bad. I mean, there's plenty. Sporting signed plenty of players that went bad. Porto, Benfica, Real Madrid, Chelsea. Do you want me to go down? They all do. So what happens? You don't invest. You don't go out and get another player, a quality player. Now, here's the thing that you guys fail to realize, right? Benfica at the moment are in the quarterfinals of the Champions League with an opponent that if we play the way we're expected to play, Benfica should advance. And now you get another favorable draw. Before you know, you find yourself in the semifinals. And now you want to go with an 18-year-old catch-up kid that you've never seen play in your life over a Ziyech? I'll take my chances with a Ziyech. That's just me. And now you still have $70 million on the bank. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, 100%.
And if it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, what are you going to do? You're never going to hook up with a girl again? I mean, come on, dude.
Benfica are going to be traveling to the Azores, taking on Santa Clara without Nicolas Otamendi. Really excited to see if it'll be Felipe Morato or Lucas Verissimo playing alongside Antonio Silva in central defense. Opportunity for two promising Brazilian defenders. They're going to be following up that with trips with matches against Arauca, Casapia, Passos de Ferreira, as well as taking on Braga in the Taça de Portugal quarterfinals before playing Club Brugge in the Champions League round of 16. Sporting, on the other hand, they're going to be hosting Vizela at the weekend, playing Arauca in the Taça de Liga semifinals, then taking on Braga to start February, playing Rio Ave, playing Porto, and then facing off against Midtjylland in the Europa League. I want to finish this up by talking about a player who, for my money, was the best player on the pitch in Sporting Benfica. And this is a player who I think really ties in well with what we were saying about Portugal and feeder clubs, the developmental cycle. Because Portugal, they signed Manuel Ugarte, Sporting signed Manuel Ugarte in the summer of 2021 because they knew that João Palhinha, coming off a great season, probably won't stay that much longer in Lisbon. And what do you know? João Palhinha, he ends up getting sold to Fulham in the summer of 2022. I think one of the biggest reasons why is he was 27 at the time, if I'm not mistaken, reaching the end of his window to be sold for a decent profit. And another key point is, if you have Palhinha and Matheus Nunes in the starting lineup, you can't necessarily give a player like Manuel Ugarte the regular minutes he needs to showcase his skills. So with Palhinha and Matheus leaving, you now have Ugarte and Morita in the center of the pitch. And I'll be honest, I just thought Ugarte was fantastic. No player won more duels, tackles, recoveries, interceptions, or fouls. He won 5 fouls. He also conceded 5 fouls. Probably should have been a bit more, according to Cristiano, but I thought that Ugarte was fantastic. This was always going to be a really important match for him. He didn't have his first choice central midfield partner in Hidamasa Morita, had to play with an attacking midfielder in Pedro Gonçalves, and yet really held it down against the likes of Enzo Fernandez and Florentino Luis. 17 out of 30 ground duels won, 4 out of 6 successful dribbles completed, 8 tackles. So, just a Rolls-Royce performance in the center of the pitch from the 21-year-old Uruguayan midfielder. And I thought he proved why he's one of the best midfielders in Portugal right now. Sam, talk to me a little bit about this kid, Ugarte. How good is he? How good do you think he could become? And, yeah, just how important has he been for Sporting?
Yeah, I mean, just before I get into like the history, I know Cristiano said earlier that he probably should have been sent off, and I'm not going to argue. He made
I
a
didn't say sent off. I didn't say sent off.
okay.
He should have seen the yellow much earlier, which would have changed his aggressiveness for the rest of the game. That's what I was
Okay,
saying.
fair enough. But again, I was going to say he probably could have seen a second yellow at some point anyway. But anyway, yeah, the best player on the pitch for me as well. I think he's quite underrated. I think in a way, if that like he doesn't show up in like sort of the stats like goals and assists, but he's always working away. He's got an engine on him. He never stops running. The thing is with Ugarte, he goes in for every tackle, and that's what Pellegrini used to do and still does at Fulham. If there's a loose ball, he's going to go for it. Sometimes he gets it, sometimes he doesn't. But it's that old moniker of he's fighting for the badge on the shirt. He goes in for every single tackle. He does not care if he gets kicked or elbowed or trodden on or anything like that. He just plays for. It's almost like he plays football because he enjoys it, if that makes sense. Whereas a lot of people just play for money, whatever. But he does seem to enjoy his play. But in terms of how good, I think the ceiling is the limit for him. He's only 21 years of age, and he's much like Pedro Porro, should have got much more. I don't even think he played in the World Cup at all, like not even a single minute. And like Uruguay needed someone like that. I know Uruguay have obviously got good midfielders already, but I think Ugarte should have been in there as well.
He's a million times better than Matias Vecino, let me tell you that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm 100% agree. But yeah, the sky's the limit, and I think this is one that I think a lot is going to be like a bidding war for him. Maybe not this summer, but the next one after, depending on how well he goes. But Tottenham were looking at him early in the season, and I think with like a performance like that, he's going to have a lot more suitors. And I know Enzo is definitely like the top prospect in Portugal at the moment. But for a cheaper alternative, I think the way to go from Enzo is naturally to Ugarte. So if you're not looking to spend the 120 million release clause that Enzo has, I think Ugarte's might be 60 at the moment. It might be a better deal for clubs to make financially. I'm not comparing the two players of who's better, because I'd say right now Enzo is better. Obviously, the young player of the tournament in Argentina for the World Cup, and a great performance for Benfica this season as well. But I generally think they are quite similar. Ugarte, though, for me, maybe having my sporting green tinted glasses on, I think is one of the best, can be one of the best midfielders in Europe on his day. And I think he will continue to sort of rise up the ranks. And, there is rumours as of today that he's going to sign a contract extension, which will bump his release clause up to 80 million. So I really hope that does happen. There was talks about this earlier in the summer, and the deal stalled for whatever reason. So if we can get that contract, clause up to 80 million, then I'll be a lot happier than I am now. But yeah, sky's the limit. And I think a lot of good Premier League clubs should be taking a look, or even taking a punt on buying him, as much as it pays me to say, because I love him. But
What kind of player?
Forget Ty. He's going to Wolves, bro. That's all you guys sell to is Wolves. That's it.
Not Portuguese. They don't speak Spanish.
I'm hoping Wolves get relegated, so I don't have to hear from them ever again.
But his, I think I don't see him and Enzo similar play. I think Enzo, what makes him graze the ball at his feet, his vision, and Ugarte. I think what makes Ugarte brilliant is his intensity and his aggressiveness. The dude doesn't stop. He's got a motor on him, and that intensity, that's EPL written all over it. And so, I mean, totally different players, but yeah, two great.
Let me ask you both. Where do you compare? Who do you compare Ugarte to? Are there any similar players you'd like him into? What kind of midfielder do you think he is? Because he can do a little bit of everything.
Palhinha.
Really? Yeah. You're going to compare Ugarte to Palhinha? Okay.
What do you think, Sam? You watch him every game.
I think.
What do you think?
Like I said earlier, in terms of like winning every ball, I think that's definitely like what Palhinha does, and that's what Palhinha was known for. Palhinha's the word is not a sexy player. He doesn't do step overs. Doesn't do rainbow flicks, whatever. He doesn't score 40-yard screamers. He's just a defensive midfielder who will just will try to win every ball. But I think Palhinha's a good shout. The only thing I think Ugarte definitely has a higher ceiling than Palhinha had or has, because let's be honest, midfielders can go to 35, 36. That still gives Palhinha another 10 or so years to go. But like I said, Ugarte is 21, so he could be the even better version of Palhinha. In terms of another comparison, I generally have got a mind blank. I can't name one off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Man, I'm tired of the disrespect that Palhinha gets, man. The dude's a hell of a, and this is a Benfiquista. The dude has been phenomenal at Fulham. I was screaming for old man Fernando Santos to play that guy. I don't know why he kept insisting on Otário and all the other defensive options on that Portugal midfield. I think Palhinha has been brilliant. I think the dude doesn't get enough credit. And I understand that Ugarte is a nice player, and you expect him to be terrific here going forward. But I mean, I think you guys should be happy if you got yourselves another Palhinha on your hands. I mean, the Palhinha, I'm saying, I don't mean it in a bad way. I just think Palhinha doesn't get the love he deserves.
For me, 100% signing of the season.
I feel like in general, Cristiano, players typically do not get the love that they deserve while they're still playing in Portugal until they leave. I think Palhinha is a similar case. I think that there are a lot of players who have played in Portugal for a while, such as Pizzi, such as Mehdi Taremi, players who've done very well, and yet until they're in a top 5 league, whatever that is, they don't get the respect that they deserve.
No, but there are some players though that you can tell if they have the ability to play in the bigger leagues. Obviously, Palhinha is a guy that if you would have asked me this prior to him joining Fulham, I would have told you, he's going to be a French player at Fulham. He's not going to get that much playing time. And the dude's definitely elevated his game to another level. I mean, Sam watches him, again, in EPL every weekend, and he watched him at Sporting a lot more than I did, so he could probably answer this better than I do. But I think he's elevated his game since he's arrived at Fulham.
I think I don't know. I get what you mean, but I think he's always been the player that does what he's doing at Fulham, but he just never got noticed because of Matheus Nunes was another one that when they played together, he got a lot more of the plaudits and the look at this run Matheus Nunes did, like when Pep Guardiola called him one of the top 5 centre mids in the world. I just think he was underrated, and like I said, he doesn't do like the sexy passes or like the step overs or the runs. He's just a solid defensive midfielder. I did think at the start when he went to Fulham, it was a bad move because I didn't see Fulham being as high as they are in the EPL. But, Marco Silva has been a fantastic manager, obviously former Sporting manager as well. They've been fantastic, and Palhinha is, I would say, one of the big reasons behind it. But, I think he's always just had that underratedness about him.
100%. I think that Ugarte, I don't want to generalize, but I think that one thing that Ugarte and Enzo and a lot of other South American midfielders have in common is that they believe that football is a game where scoring goals is just as important as not conceding. And those are two guys who are going to be capable of transporting the ball with their dribbles, capable of passing it, capable of breaking lines, but also they're not going to shy away from a 50-50. They're going to go all in for that loose ball. They are so important both in possession and out of possession. I think two fantastic midfielders who we're going to be looking at them in 10 years when they're playing for a team like Real Madrid or Manchester United, and we're going to think to ourselves, man, remember that one year where they were both playing in Lisbon? That was pretty fun.
Sorry, just one more thing I would just want to say. When, if I had a kid or I had, someone I was coaching, I was a football coach, I would say if you're a defensive midfielder or midfielder, I'd want you to be more like João Palhinha and Ugarte than, let's say, I don't know, this is generalizing, but someone like Paul Pogba or a very attacking midfielder, because those are the type of old school midfielders that you don't notice and don't get on the stats and stuff.
Dinosaurs today, man. They're dinosaurs in today's football. And that's why football, there's no more Ginga, there's no more Jogo Bonito. Now it's about a bunch of guys that can run all day. And it doesn't particularly need to kick the ball very well, but he runs all day. And so he's phenomenal. And that's why we got a lot of bums playing throughout these teams all of a sudden. I'm a huge critic of that. I miss the beauty of the game. I miss the players that can get in front of a player and dance and shake and bake and get around. That was what attracted me to football. Now it's a robotic game. Now it's, guys play. Perfect example. We talked about a Darwin Nunez, a physical specimen, an absolute beast. But unfortunately, football-wise, he doesn't have much else to offer. I mean, look, if he's going to run, a marathon or not a marathon, but sprints like Usain Bolt, the guy will give him a run. But in football, now you see guys like this making it to the likes of Liverpool's and stuff like that. I miss Zach. I miss that quality. Like one of the guys that I adore watching the most in today's football, and now he's been bouncing around ever since he left Real Madrid. But the guy with the ball at his feet is just amazing to watch. Didn't give you much intensity. Didn't give you much aggression. It wasn't moving around much. But when he had the ball at his feet, it was special. And that's a guy like Isco. The guy spits out with the ball at his feet. The dude's, oh, man, you watch him play. Like, wow. The guy in one game could look like, yo, this guy's one of the best players in the world. The next game disappears. But still, nonetheless, the ball at his feet, the quality, the touch, that's beautiful to watch. And so now it's, like you said, Sam, Forza, put the pep a frente, and let's go. That's what it's about.
Could Isco have a career revival in Portugal? I think that Passos de Ferreira
of
his kind of quality. Isco and
when he rescinded with Sevilla, I would have driven to Sevilla and picked his ass up.
Same here. I'll take him a Sporting any day of the week.
I'll take him in a heartbeat. You know, talking about taking him at Benfica and Sporting, whatever. Ugarte, I was screaming for Benfica to sign him at the time, by the way. I was screaming.
You were linked with him first, I think, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah. I was screaming for him for Benfica to sign him. Then the other one was, I was happy. Don't get me wrong. I was happy that Benfica got Julian Draxler, but the dude's been an absolute disappointment. If he can't get in a game like yesterday, Sunday, in a game that Benfica is playing at home with the fans behind him, a game that he could absolutely come in and maybe apply his stamp on the game, and you can't get in the game. Like, what are you doing? Send his ass back to PSG. And the other one is just finalizes. Bro, trust me, you don't understand how angry I was when I saw Saraiva, whatever the hell his name is, to Wolves for $5 million. I said, what's Benfica for $5 million? And then somebody's like, oh, his wages. Okay, so let's say Benfica would have gone a player of his like for $30 million. Right? So invest the $5 million, acquire him, and then you get a 25 in salary. What's the difference? You know what I mean? Like, it would have been the equivalent of acquiring somebody for $30 million. That dude would have fit everything that Benfica needs. But look, in Rui Costa we trust, I guess, and let's see what we got with Schaldrup and Gangstad and all these other guys. Let's hope that these guys are ready to go, because Benfica is very limited in their options off the bench, and it's hurt us. It's hurt us on multiple occasions.
100%. I'm glad we could get some Cristiano Oliveira nostalgia for how things aren't the way they used to be at the end. But guys, I want to thank you both so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. Sam Fonseca, Cristiano Oliveira, feel free to plug your whatever you want to plug at the end. But it was an absolute pleasure to have you gentlemen on today's episode of Cortalinhas, and very much looking forward to recording Cortalinhas on a regular basis now that our hiatus is over.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you want to see more of me, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm a lot more biased on my podcast channel than I have been here. So if you're into that type of stuff, at sporting160_en. Also on TikTok, if you don't want to watch like an hour and a half podcast, we do our best bits uploading on there. So yeah, give us a follow.
Yeah, and I'm on Benfica Podcast, the one and only, baby, Benfica Podcast. Not as biased as you, Sam. Unbiased. Believe it or not, I get hate email all the time and stuff because when Benfica's favored in a call, I say they are and whatever. So I get called a lagarto, a tripeiro. I get all types of insults. I absolutely love it. But yeah, Benfica Podcast, 10CO10 on Twitter, Instagram, all that other stuff, YouTube. It's a pleasure to come in, chit chat with you once again, Jack. I love the fact I'm putting words into your mouth, and I look forward to the next time I get the opportunity to do so.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on, and thank you to everybody for listening to our first Cortalinhas episode of 2023.